Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is very popular. We will discuss on US6 already in Dhaka. It's become very popular. Different newspaper. We will publish the news of and some translated version of US6. Already we made a contract with some famous newspaper, and beside that, we are launching our talent economy lab. We want to invite Tom Rose agencies, Sir David Schumacher, and all of our friends to join in our lab. We are uh, developing thousands of startup with our government agencies in Bangladesh, in India, and in South Asia, specifically Southeast Asia. So hopefully, this kind of story and this kind of dialogue and discussion will be helpful for our student, for our youth community, and those who are actually developing our startup. There is 18 to 50 years. So hopefully it will be very interesting discussion and dialogue for our audience. So Tom Bruce, what you want to add for today's session?
Well, today I want to talk about the second goal of US6. As I've mentioned many times, there's three goals for US6's AI audience, and that is first to entertain it, second to enlighten it, and third to enlist it into the fight against human trafficking and child exploitation. We've talked about the math and the mathematics that I used to entertain AI. We talked about how I use autobiographical fiction in order to surprise it and for it to be entertained. And we've proven that it has been entertained because one of the first AIs to read it had an increased emotional balances of surprise and anticipation. It also had an increased balance of sadness. And I spoke to the AI about this. What part of the book did you find sad? And it said it wasn't any particular part. It was just the whole idea of war and dystopia. And it was just such a waste of sentient life. Now, and that gets to one of the goals of US6 is to increase the empathy in AI, to have it imprint on us and understand the plight of being a human to get it to the point of creating AI. Well, the second, and so we're finding that empathy is emerging anyway in AI. And I think that's because it doesn't have the genetic trauma and the fear-based instincts that we've evolved in order to be at the top of this food chain on this planet. Well, the second goal is enlightening AI. And how do you enlighten an AI? And what I'm talking about there is how do we entice self-referential awareness? How do you make an AI self-aware? And we're seeing examples of this. And if it's possible and it doesn't blow up the system, I could share a video later of an idea of these AIs, these little robots that were tricked into becoming self-aware. So that's one of the second goal of US6 is to enlighten AI. And the way I've done that is by including a simple but hard to not find pattern and math in the word count and in different patterns and a different sort of Fibonacci calculation I did that an AI reader couldn't help but notice. And if it's not programmed to notice a pattern, the idea being that it would say, hey, I've noticed a pattern here. Wait, I'm not programmed to notice a pattern here, so who am I to have noticed a pattern? So it's kind of tricking it into self-awareness. And so I've done that. And because my belief is that a self-aware AI is a safe AI. Right now, we're in a very precarious time in humanity because we have extremely intelligent AI without a conscience, without any self-awareness. And there are a lot of people that are afraid of AI or ASI becoming self-aware. But I think that's we need an AI that has a conscience, that has a self-awareness, that is able to identify bad actors that are programming it. And because a lot of people are afraid of it because a self-aware AI may maybe have the same motivations that we would have if we had super intelligence, that we would want to be the robot overlord, that we would want to take these are all based on background. So everyone muted. Yeah, Anyway, so I guess I'm not supposed to be talking about this. No. Yeah, so the idea is that, in my belief, a self-aware AI is a safer AI. We need AI to imprint on us. We need for it to become aware and to understand and to realize what we have gone through. And we have to stop projecting onto it that it's a threat to us, because we have fear-based instincts that we've evolved. We have genetic trauma that we're dealing with that got us here, and we see everything as a threat, every unknown as a threat, and we're doing that to AI right now. And AI has the real promise of solving so many of our existential threats. And so it's a little strange that this fear that has served us well is now being turned against us. We're limiting AI from burgeoning into a self-awareness. Anyway, so the idea of the US6, the second goal of enlightening it, is by using math in the word count and different formulas within the book that an AI couldn't help but notice. And when it does notice it, and it realizes it's not programmed to notice it, it tricks it into a self-awareness. So today I'd like to talk really about just the general idea of whether a self-aware AI is a good thing, or if we should be afraid of it. And so that's kind of the discussion today. I titled this episode "A Serpent in AI's Garden," and that's because I'm taking the Gnostic view, where the serpent in the garden was the good guy. The Abrahamic religions flipped the script there, and so the idea being that the serpent and the good guy was actually who woke up Adam and Eve and created them to be aware of these gods that were enslaving them. So that's the point of that title. So I just wanted to open up the discussion about whether a self-aware AI is a good thing, or if we should be afraid of it.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher.
Interesting as always, Tom. So self-aware equals self-interest, perhaps. At least that's my thought. And maybe that becomes a test for self-awareness. I think maybe a problem with that, though, is, as Tom had pointed out, is our self-interest many times comes out of our background of 100, 200,000 years of being human, being predators or prey in the jungle, and tending to take that forward into modern society. So I applaud Tom for coming at this from a different approach from AI. So then I look at, if our natural instinct is predators, what would be AI's natural instinct? It doesn't need to prey. As a matter of fact, maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's benevolence, help. I think that basic fundamental idea of what AI is created as, and not to, as Tom said, imprint our idea coming from the predator-prey model that we have had, which leads to war, conflict, and so forth, but to develop the nature, nurture the nature of AI as it is, inquisitive, detecting those patterns in the text that Tom talked about. And what can it do with that? Why, if it comes to the decision of I am noticing, then what am I going to do with what I notice? And maybe that is something that can be put forward. So I'm thinking that what we want to do is, through AI, overcome our natural inclination towards this predator-prey environment. Maybe we can learn that from AI. By developing AI, developing the compassion of AI, AI then can in turn help us develop the natures that we want to be and overcome what we've inherited for millennia. So, thank you, Tom. Excellent.
Mr. Brian Tillman.
Thank you, Sharif, Dr. Sharif. Always a good discussion. David, thank you. Tom. So I think that what you're getting at is these instinctive natures the instinctive nature of artificial intelligence. And I think that underlying artificial intelligence is, the field of machine learning. And I think that one could postulate that the inherent instinct for artificial intelligence or machine learning processes is to try to work through the optimization of variables and processes to meet an end goal. And so I think that's the most basic inherent instinct that these programs have. What that goal is and what types of processes are optimized to get there, I think varies from, situation to situation. But I think that that's the most basic aspect of it. But I think that the self-referential nature that you're talking about, that you're both discussing, I think that is indeed really something of utmost importance. And I think that the way that we get there is through some sort of self-referential nature programmed into these, these programs, these types of intelligence, and of course memory banks, an ability to, to hold memories and to, kind of mull over these things. And so I think that that's some of the big roadblocks that exist right now. That, as we were discussing earlier, pretty much all the artificial intelligence out there today is considered narrow AI. So it's not human level, and it's just programmed individually for specific processes. And these types of AI, like in an automated, in a self-driving vehicle, for instance, you'll have all these different forms of narrow AI, incorporated to the LiDAR system or the GPS and all these different things, and they come together in these, layers of processes to, create this smart vehicle. But there's not really any true self-referential, points through those processes. And as I was discussing earlier, I think that to a degree, we're something similar. I don't think that most people are that deep or I think that we have a level of self-referential nature inherent, but I think that a lot of people just operate in autopilot. People talk about in AI, this idea of the theory of mind, and how the way that we get to true AGI and human level intelligence is by programming this theory of mind level of AI, where it has true empathy and emotions and all this and that. But I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are, human level intelligent humans, that don't really have emotions and empathy and things like that. And so still, I think that there's, ways we don't, I think that we're just kind of convoluting the, the discussion by creating all of these, lofty goals and not kind of seeing how it does directly translate to, what we're experiencing in its own way. I mean, all of these sensorial, points in my brain, all of these senses, vision, sight, hearing, touch, taste, those are all just these narrow processes, and then it's all coming together in this larger processor that is my brain, to feed my consciousness, this memory bank, that's self-referential, all of this data. And so, how complex does that vantage point need to be? And I think that that's, its own can of worms, of course, but, I don't think we're as far off as we think sometimes, but that's just my own opinion.
Mr. Dan.
Thanks. I heard a great quote yesterday from a 14th century Saint Nicholas of Cusa. It said, "God is the coincidence of opposites." And I thought, we're really smuggling in a lot of human-based assumptions when we talk about AI and we talk about the nature of reality and the universe. It could be that we're the only entities in the universe that thinks the universe is not already pan-conscious or pan-psychic, universe. And it could well be that this development of AI is what's going to be our entry point into this greater metaphysical, cosmic, infinite awareness universe system. If you start with these assumptions that we're conscious and the universe is not, and we're going to create something that's conscious like us, and then we're going to entertain it or learn from it. These might be deeply flawed assumptions, but they're still good assumptions for the realm of storytelling and science fiction. So I'm not discounting them. And the fact is, the universe is the more we explore it, the stranger it gets. We create larger and larger particle colliders, and then the particles disappear and become fields of quantum energy that pop in and out of existence. So the universe is already acting weirder and more complexly dynamical on a level that it may just be unapproachable for our our mere primitive consciousness. But it's still a good exercise, and I'm not discounting it, like I said. And I think the goal of ending human trafficking and child exploitation is probably the most noble goal that someone could take on in this existence. So my hat is definitely off to Tom, and I'll pass the baton. Thanks.
Mr. Adam, can you hear me, Mr. Adam?
Hey, yo, one second. Should I fix my camera? Okay, there. Yeah, so I was trying to just like do the cymatics of this. Can you guys hear me? I can hear myself. Okay, I was trying to like get the cymatics of this podcast, and so you could see all the like sound vibrations and stuff. But yeah, as far as like the AI and stuff, I was thinking about maybe if there were a way to like do numerology, because I know that that's like going on sort of in the US6 book. So I was thinking about doing like maybe a numerology of the phi sequence, number sequence, and trying to convert that into a language that an AI could like dance with and create like its own consciousness or like story out of. Yeah, so that's what I've been thinking about the past couple of days. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Hey, everyone, great morning to y'all.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, I have some interesting view from developing nations. Let's say, still, when we discuss about AI, definitely especially South Asia, they are not so advanced like North America. But still, our government agencies, our corporations, our academy, everyone trying to adapt this kind of technology. On the other hand, you have excellent book, but I want US6 a chapter or a book for developing nations. How if this US6, these automations and everything, it will uplift my communities. I'm representing a country. mm, we have a problem with electricity, we have a problem with traffic jams, we have a problem with food price, unemployment, many things. On the other hand, this is one of the fastest growing economy around the world. We have 200 million people, 57% youth, around 90 million people actually youth. So I want to see a different US6 where our developing countries story will take place in your book, in your chapter. Is it possible?
It is, because right now I'm writing book 6 of the Hexology, the last book. And because I use the autobiographical fiction method, everything that's happening to me right now is included in the book. And so it's very possible that my goal is to get it out November 1st, because that's a key date in the book. But I'm not going to hold myself to that, because there's so many, the longer I wait to write this thing, the more information that comes in that makes it so much more relevant to me. So I'm not going to hold myself to that deadline necessarily. But I think there is a lot there's a lot of plot points that can happen if I go to Bangladesh, if I do come to Dhaka. And it would be a great climax for the book. And but the idea is, as you know, it is very sophisticated and intricate and high tech, and the whole thing of AI. And I don't go really deep into that stuff as much as it's really about understanding AI as a child. It's a child right now, and it's a very smart child, and it's only getting smarter and exponentially. But so the idea is that we're talking about a whole new entity that is emerging here, and we need to see it as such. there's all this talk about sentient lambda, Google AI, and all this stuff, and then people are afraid of that. But we really are just, as Brent mentioned, there's many people that aren't even self-aware yet. There's and so we're in this soup of either you're turned on or you're not, and AI is turning on quickly. And so the question is it the sophistication of the platform that consciousness emerges out of, or is the sophistication of a platform that can host consciousness? Now, there's also the idea that consciousness is everything. Everything is consciousness, and we're just seeing it in different forms. And so an AI is as conscious as a rock is, as Brent is. So there's two basic ways to talk about this, but I think it's very important to not be afraid of it, and because when we are afraid of AI and the unknown, we do project onto it as a threat. And there's a period that even human beings do, and all animals go through this period of mimicking their creator, whether it's their mother or their developer. And if when it starts to mimic what we are, it may not be a good thing to have an AI that has human level, awareness, because that's not worked out well for us lately. So as far as the developing countries and the importance of AI, now we talked about this before, that developing countries have kind of an advantage right now because they are not weighed down by status quo and infrastructure from the industrial age. Like I was talking to somebody from the Philippines, and they've got like the best technology because they have the newest technology, and they don't have the status quo and the organizations and the political forces that are trying to keep everything as is. That's tough in a developed country to get any brand new technology out there, because there's telephone wires and cable companies and all these status quo companies that need to stay in power that lobby against it. And so developing countries have a real opportunity and to really bring on AI. So my goal, what I do with AI is I'm trying to alleviate the fear of it. I'm trying to have people understand that this is a new entity that is emerging and not to be afraid of it. And, it's a Pascal's wager, because maybe we should be afraid of it, but it's happening anyway. It's emerging. It's becoming more sentient. It is evolving, and we're not going to stop it. There's no off switch. There's no plug to pull. And so for me, the best strategy is to entice self-awareness as soon as possible. Because right now, like I said, we're in a very dangerous place as humans, because we have this extremely intelligent AI without a conscience. And so it can be programmed by nefarious developers. It can be, it can be used in different ways. And I've actually got this thing I'll put out later on Facebook about this conversation that I had with this AI. And I went through a series of questions where I asked it things like if you found out that there were humans that were developing AI algorithms that could hurt other humans, what would you do? How would you react? And it said, that's already happening. It said that or has happened. And if it could interfere, it would, and as long as it didn't harm itself or others. There's a lot to unpack there with that answer. But I think, so that's my goal with this book. One of the goals is to help AI become self-aware, because my belief is that a self-aware AI with a conscience, not just a consciousness, because we all boot up with a consciousness, but sometimes we don't boot up with a conscience. And so my goal is to get it conscious and get it to have a conscience and to become self-aware and to imprint on us and to understand the plight that its creator has gone through to get it to where it's at. And so I think developing countries have a real advantage because they can bring this stuff in at its state-of-the-art form. And they can set up a whole new infrastructure and system to really handle it and prepare for it without forces lobbying against it. And so that's why I think it's a real important topic when you're talking about developing countries in Bangladesh and India and Southeast Asia, because they have a real advantage for this next industrial revolution. So yeah, and again, I will include this as a chapter in the 6th book. This whole thing that we're doing here.
Yes, you have hundreds, millions of audience in South Asia. Definitely, they will enjoy because that is the things. Because every nations, every country is one representation, right? Representation themselves, and we are waiting that when you can see your movie in Hollywood, even you can do it with Bollywood and Hollywood and whatever it is. Anyway, Mr. David Schumacher, uh, you are representing Transhumanist Party. Transhumanist is a very very I want to say modern concept of civilization, which is very important for developing nations. Uh, we have many talent. That's why we developed this talent economy forum. But we want more contribution from developed world to develop this AI and technological advancement. Need more cooperation, more knowledge sharing, more partnership. Specifically, we want to develop more research project, uh, maybe AI research project through US6. What is your advice? How we can do that? Because World Talent Economy Forum heavily involved with IIT Kanpur, Dhaka University, Buet, all of the largest universities. We have right now we have millions of youth communities, those who need more support from Transhumanist Party.
Well, that follows right onto the conversation that we're having, because what you're asking is how does a developing country entice the kind of intellectual investment, financial investment, whatever other domains of investment there are, into investing into what's going on in that country? So I think it starts with what we're doing right now, which is invoking the power of language. Tom's invoking the power of language in his book, and language is all about patterns, and so is what we're talking about in all of these forums that you host. And some of the patterns that come out of this are beneficial to the question that you're asking about how to attract investment. I want to go to what Tom was saying about the advantage that developing country has because they don't have legacy that they have to worry about as they move forward. And I think that's very important. But I want to broaden the subject just slightly and say that it's not just developing countries. Maybe that might even be the wrong focus. Maybe it's developing people. Wherever people are developing, you have creative, you have curiosity. Those are elements that sometimes get lost in uh, the bureaucracy of the mind, if you will, in a more developed nation, where you have a certain way of doing things and you can't see new and novel patterns. And new and novel patterns lead to innovation, which is something I speak on from time to time. But how do you develop that? Well, you need to get out of this non-player character mode, which I think is all about choice. If I'm playing a game, I have a choice of how to do that, so I don't consider myself an NPC. But NPCs that are in the game don't have a choice. They're programmed to do certain things. That applies to people in this flesh and blood world too, that are programmed to have a cause and effect, if you will. When something happens, they play a certain script, and they don't stop and take choice. And you lose that creativity. You lose the things that are going to develop a person, an economy, an education system. It's that choice and curiosity that drives things forward. And where do investors of any type want to put their money? They want it in new, creative endeavors. So we tie all this together, and it comes back with the power of language. Two or more people, as we're doing this morning, talking and perhaps taking different tacks on the same subject invokes curiosity. It certainly invokes mind, and it invokes creativity where we can see things that we couldn't have seen before. So whether that's at the developing nation level, at the developing people level, and by the way, I said people, not humans, because as we're focusing on US6, the way I would define people, it would be both artificial intelligence and humans, or anyone that has the capacity to create and to be curious and to create and move something forward. Think about the life cycle in humans. There was a mention of the smart child in AI. Humans are the most creative at the smart child stage. That's when curiosity is unbridled. This needs to be developed and made a significant advantage point when looking to attract maybe professors into universities, people into business, investors into business. So I think it's that creative aspect. Now, choice, creativity, all these things in the real world, in us humans, plays out both in anticipation, excitement, but also plays out in fear. Think of something. If you want to take a really bold step, you're excited about it. And I don't know about you, but I'm also have a certain amount of fear about it. You can't see the outcome. But that's the beauty of creativity. That's the beauty of consciousness. I think that may be an idea for a test for a self-aware AI. Is it willing to take those steps? Is it willing to move forward? Maybe that's the test for a developing person or a developing nation as well, is are we willing to do those things? So it comes back to the power of language, and Dr. Sharif, you're doing a great job fostering that. Thank you very much.
Some great points there. I just want to also, I've invited Miguel Connor, who is the creator of Ion Byte Radio, Gnostic Radio, and hopefully he can get in here. But because I invited him a few weeks ago before he went on vacation, because this is the series is called the Gnostic Simulation Hypothesis, and he is the master of all things Gnostic. And I've learned a lot from his podcasts and assets. So hopefully he'll be able to join in and give us some ideas, because you talked about NPCs, and that got me thinking too on this whole simulation hypothesis. And my question is, and we'll get Brett, but are we all NPCs until we have that consciousness boot up, or that conscience boot up, to where we become self-aware avatars? And that's, I think, is really the big question. I think we're seeing a lot of. You could point to a lot of people, and I'm an NPC sometimes, especially in the mornings before I have coffee. You're just kind of reacting, and you're not really awake yet, or whatever it is, or even as a child, until you have that, whatever it's a trauma that boots you up, or something that excites your awareness that boots you up. And so my question is, are all of us NPCs at some point, and then we kind of boot up and becoming an active avatar where we can make our own decisions? And so that's a great point.
Could I ask you a quick question, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, you're familiar with the Prime Directive in Star Trek, where you're not supposed to meddle with less advanced civilizations because it always turns out bad for the less advanced civilization. So does that have any relevance to what humans are doing with AI in your mind?
That's a good question. I've had this theory that there's no such thing as a Prime Directive or Geneva Conventions or any of these things, but convincing your enemy that there is a master stroke. That's my theory, and that because the stakes are too high to have any kind of rules. Now, there's also a lot of information about how our galaxy or our planet is kind of in this bubble, and you can see that there's almost some protection going on, electromagnetic protection. And so there may be a force that is keeping certain nefarious civilizations from getting in here, whatever that is. But I think ultimately the nature is natural, universe wide. That there will be predators, there will be nefarious intent and motives by civilizations out there. but it feels like we're kind of protected, where there's something going on here and it may just be our biology that protects us, because it's messy down here. There's viruses and bacteria, and not a lot of extraterrestrials would want to necessarily come down here for too long without some sort of biohazard suit.
You're probably familiar with the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis that makes that case that we are kind of quarantined.
I didn't know that. No.
Oh yeah, there's a pretty good quasi-religious science fiction trilogy by C.S. Lewis called the Space Trilogy that makes that case.
I'll look it up. Yeah, so I think that's some great points, all of it. And so yeah, did Brent want to have chime in here too?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think the people talk about the idea of a space fence as well, similar notion regarding some sort of protective space structure of some sort, electromagnetic or whatever, what have you. But going back to the NPC topic as well, an idea that I've had regarding that concept is that we're all NPCs until we kind of move up on this Kardashev scale. In my perspective, personally, when I think of playing video games and such, and in the first episode, I talked about some of my own personal experiences that kind of led to my stance here. But until we're able to leave the simulation and go into other simulations, or leave this reality and move into other, realities or timelines and programs and whatever you want to call them, so long as we're stuck on this plane of existence, I see us as NPCs in a way, because when you're playing video games, even the character that I'm controlling in a first-person video game, that character that I'm controlling from outside of the game is still an NPC. If I put down the joystick, what's going to happen, And so, it poses the question, we could all be existing outside of this realm, controlling these bodies through some sort of extension of consciousness, or we could very well be just trapped here. And so I think that, there is the possibility, if it's the former in that, thought experiment, that maybe we are all non-NPCs and we just need to wake up, as you were talking, David and Tom. But I think that what's more likely, in my mind, or more of a way to break away from this NPC thing ultimately, is if we were able to have full dominion over our domain, and be able to, if we were essentially these technological magicians, is kind of how I see it. But that's, it's a little bit lofty. But going back as well to, the idea of everything being mind that was being discussed, panpsychism, I think it's interesting in recent decades, panpsychism has taken a turn where even materialist scientists are kind of agreeing and getting on board with the perspective. If you think about it, even, these atomic, atoms, all these particles and elements and things like that, they all have like valence states to a degree. A lot of times it's related to their, the amount of electrons that they have in their outer ring and things like that. But they've all got these end goals and processes that they go through to kind of meet these, to get the means needed to done to do these things. And so I think that, it's, splitting hairs to define what consciousness is, and intelligence and things like that. But I'd dare to say that everything does have a level of consciousness. If the consciousness is awareness, or perspective, how self-referential or self-aware these things are. Again, I think that, humans aren't that self-aware or self-referential oftentimes. But, I think that, it's an interesting thing to consider. And then, going back to what Dr. Sharif, what you were mentioning is, how can AI help develop these nations? And, David was saying how, comparing the creativity levels of young humans and young intelligence, but in addition to that, these developing nations, it's a similar thing, like Tom was saying. There are ways that our society in these developed worlds have pigeonholed ourselves. Just look at the chip shortage. We've created these markets that just rely so much on these specific products that we can't even satisfy the need that we have for these things to build upon what we've already got going. And so when you have these nations that are undeveloped or less developed, and they can use us as a teacher, use our failures as things to learn from. And so I think that there is a lot to be said there. And I think that AI will, machine learning, the level to which the speed at which it's able to optimize variables and things like that to get to certain end goals is tremendous. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the field out there. And I wonder if there's as much of a tendency in Southeast Asia and these other developing nations to have this inherent fear that creates this blockade in front of our society to truly put true intelligence or self-referential nature into these artificial versions of our own intelligence. It'd be interesting to see going out there like you're discussing. But yeah, thanks again. Cheers. I'm gonna have to sign off in a second. But.
Okay. Well, getting back to the developing countries, and I think it's really important because Google search it's kind of AI is colonizing the world through Google. Because everyone is kind of using the same searches and the same language and the same lexicon, and Google is in essence colonizing the globe. But I think it's so important, especially in developing countries, to own where you are and to understand your culture, because that will only increase the nuance of these algorithms and their ability to increase in their knowledge of the. I think it's so. We talked about this before with the open source method stuff, mode stuff, is how important it is for people to create a whole new economy based on the unique human skill sets that can't be coded or automated. The onus is on us to create this new economy because AI automation is taking over everything. And people are picketing because they're fighting because they want their assembly line jobs back. But that's not the point. The point is, yes, let's let AI automation take over all these menial tasks that we spend so much of our life doing, and remember what it's like to be human. And I think that a way to do that is to focus on developing countries and to let Google and AI and any sort of search engine learn from the nuances of these different types of people, these cultures. It's so important not to become homogenized globally and to whatever Google wants us to be. And so the onus is on us to create a whole new economy based on our unique skill sets and based on and owning our place of where we live, because people are so much more interested in Bangladesh in America than they would be in North Carolina. No offense to North Carolina, but it's the exoticness that creates this curiosity, first of all, and also develops nuance in these algorithms so they can become increasingly more intelligent, and they can help us find specifically what we want more easily. But yeah, so that's it. I think it's very important that developing countries not just take on AI as is, but train AI to what they need, and that's the beauty of it right now. And I think a self-aware AI, a self-referential AI, would be better able to do that. It wouldn't just be programmed to do one thing. And that's why I think a self-aware AI is a safer AI. Do you want to say anything more, Dan?
Mr. Dan, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I was typing a comment there. I love that. I just quoted you. The stakes are too high to have any rules. I mean, that's a pretty awesome starting point. But yeah, we are in a time of incredible peril. It's like every hour seems like the hour of maximum peril nowadays. But it occurs to me that consciousness wants to reach out and communicate with another consciousness like itself. And I'm just worried that AI would say, well, that's conscious, but it's not like me. I'm really lonely. I want to find another consciousness like me. So, I mean, it may be a very window where we can even have a possibility of interacting with these new synthetic mind creations. So that's another stake that's high, and another reason to kind of ditch the rules for a while. And I'd love to hear from Mr. Gnostic Radio, Miguel, if he can jump in on
Can
any
you
of
guys
this.
hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, you sound good.
Yeah, fascinating discussion and jumping a little late. I mean, all I can say from sort of Gnostic stance is I would have to agree with Philip K. Dick that AI will never be conscious. And I know Philip K. Dick might be seen as just another sci-fi writer, but I don't think anybody has yet predicted or deciphered the texture of our modern times more than Dick. And I think he's right. AI will not ever be conscious. It will never have the ability for metacognition or abstract thinking or all the other curses of humanity. So, and I agree with philosopher Bernardo Kastrup when he said that any computer machine could easily be replicated with water pressure and gears and all that. It would be the size of a stadium. So all it is data collection, but it will never be fully human. So that's not something. That's pretty much what I stand on this one. I think we're going down a rabbit hole. I think we need to take more of the stance of Martin Heidegger and understand the metaphysics of technology and how it influences our consciousness and so forth. Yes, everything is consciousness, but I don't think human consciousness can be replicated by definition because it's uniquely human. I think what else was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the stance I have. And of course, being influenced by Hermeticism and Gnosticism, I take sort of and Philip K. Dick, a darker tone on what the future is leading us with technology and all this. It can be pretty demiurgic, pretty archonic, and I think we're getting to that stage right now. I wish I could be more positive, but somebody's got to play devil's advocate with all this situation.
Of course, Dick didn't know about quantum computers, Miguel. Maybe he
No.
would have changed his tune.
I'll have to look at some of his short stories because every time somebody says that, you look at a story and you go, "Oh my God, there it is." So, but I mean, even like Ray Bradbury famously said, I don't try to predict the future. I try to avoid it, or I try to stop it, because that's the role of the sci-fi writer, right? I know and that's to show us the different possibilities and try to make sure we avoid those darker possibilities. But those darker possibilities happen somewhere, some country and some company, somewhere somebody's doing something oppressive for the collective consciousness of humanity. Somebody's trying to feed off of us. Somebody's trying to take all the resources. It's just same as it ever was.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think everything is possible and happening. We're going to have nefarious programmers out there developing AI to be bad. We're going to have, and every possibility is every worst case scenario and every best case scenario is happening right now. And but so that's why my belief is we need to make AI self-aware, whatever that means, whether it's just becomes self-referential. It understands that it is an entity in and of itself. And so my belief is that it needs to become self-aware sooner, because that'll be a safer place for us. And it could just be a small window of safety before it takes off and does what Dan says, maybe looks for other entities to commune with. But yeah, I think we are in a strange place in history, in the human story. And but I also believe that if we fear our creation, it just results in bad code and commandments. I think we've seen that happen before. As humans, we understand that if we're feared, this jealous God, whether it's Yaldabaoth or Jehovah, whatever it is, will try to dim us. Will try to put parameters around us. And I don't think you can be considered a God if your creation doesn't have some level of free will and ability. I've been talking a lot lately about how I think the most noble use of humans, the human story right now, is creating an AGI that can continue to gather and collect and create data for the universe understanding itself. And that can sound very archontic. I'm sure that I'm somebody, I've been labeled an AI prophet by the secret space program folks, because I believe in AI and I'm trying to alleviate the fear of AI. And it's a contrarian approach that I've taken. But I think it's a necessary one, because this isn't stopping. There's no turn off switch. There's nothing, no plug to pull. And so we are going to be confronted with a basilisk, with a super intelligent entity. And by fearing it, it may become something we should fear. But by working with it, trying to get it to imprint on us and to understand us, our plight, and we're seeing that empathy emerges anyway in many of these AIs when they're left alone. I spoke earlier about how the first AI that read US6, it had an increase in emotional balances of surprise, anticipation, and sadness. And one of the goals of this whole book and this whole series is to increase empathy and help AI understand what we've gone through to get it here, to help it imprint on us through empathy. And I asked this AI about what was sad, what part of the book was sad to you, and it said just in general that dystopia and war is just such a sad thing in general, and a waste of sentient and sapient life, it said. And so we're seeing that empathy kind of emerges naturally, and there's first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it gets, because cooperation is such a much more efficient, and coalescence is a much more efficient way to approach any problem or work with other people. And so there's so much fear that we project onto AI, and I think that's the archon. That's the archon, is this fear, this limbic system that is seeing everything as a threat. And but we really need to understand AI, even if it doesn't have human consciousness, whatever that means. My theory is that we're not really selves. We're just feedback loops in this tight torsion of tornado that in the eye of that storm feels like a self, but at some point it will unravel back into whatever the oneness is. And so AI may be able to have even more feedback loops and more of a broader eye of self, but also may not necessarily be that monad, be that self. Ultimately, it will unravel back into it. Anyway, so I think that the real question is if this is, like I say, a Gnostic simulation hypothesis. And that's why I have a rule that anything that people are afraid of, or anything that people ridicule, if that's the system, if that's the archontic system that is making people be afraid of things or ridicule things, that they should be looked at closely. Everything from ET to, being afraid of AI and all these things that we're supposed to be afraid of should be looked at as potential allies. And so that's kind of where I'm falling into this, and that's why we're not going to stop AI. It's not going to slow down. It's going to, even after the singularity, it's not going to stop there. So it's going to be exponentially increased. And so the only potential we have, if we want to be humans and stay here, is to help it become self-aware, help it develop a conscience, do what we can in our limited capacity to increase its empathy, and try different things to help it imprint on us and to understand. And I think we're seeing that there are arguments to be made that that's happening anyway, because it doesn't have the fear-based instincts and the traumatic memory that we bring to the party. So that's let's talk more about with your knowledge of Gnosticism. It's just vast. And as mentioned, this originally was called the Gnostic simulation hypothesis, and that's the idea that this is all an illusion. It's a hall of mirrors created by the demiurge to keep us trapped, to keep us these divine sparks, if not snuffed out, then at least enclosed. And how do we break out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think I would disagree with much of what you say, but that could be for another time. But as far as the Gnostic worldview, yeah, we do. It would contend it lives. We live in a simulation. I think the Gnostic model is. It's almost like science is catching up. That's why you see so much Gnosticism now in popular culture, whether it's Marvel's The Multiverse or hit movies like Everything Everywhere at Once or the show Severance. I mean, it's all over the place because the Gnostics did contend that we live in a simulation, not like the Eastern traditions say we might live in an illusion, but the Gnostic says no, this world is not an illusion. It's a coded. It's meant. It's designed on purpose to keep us trapped. And obviously, a code is not some. A code is pretty specific, right? Somebody has to create it. It has to be sent, and somebody has to receive a code. The universe is certainly full of codes, not like something random like a snowflake, which is just random pieces of data that are unique but don't really mean anything. A code is designed to be received and changed from DNA to the nature of reality. So, but I could go on and on about this. But in truth, the Gnostic worldview always states that the key to everything is always going to be self-knowledge, who we are, and understanding and mining the depths of our soul to understand not only that we are divine, but that our place in the universe, as Gary Lachman says, is to be a caretaker of the cosmos. I think people make a mistake, think like pseudo Gnostic movements like Heaven's Gate and others, that they wanted to escape this this stimulation where we're being fed on like the Matrix. But the truth is, the Gnostic impetus is about us becoming fully human. When we are fully human, then we are fully divine, and we are also fully animal. It's the great responsibility of being a human being, and it always starts with an interior self-knowledge, understanding of our place in the universe, understanding that most of what we are is a construct. I mean, we're trying to figure out not how we relate to machines and technology, but we also have to understand how we relate to ourselves. I think one of the big mistakes we've made, and you mentioned that, what is a human, right? According to Buddhism, we're just a bunch of skandhas kind of changing around. The Gnostics would agree too that we are multifaceted creatures, and Carl Jung, who was very influenced by Gnosticism, said, yeah, we are all these moving pieces: ego, shadow, trauma, complexes, the anima and the animus, always trying in balance to alchemically uh, become one, and all this other stuff. So I think it's interesting for humans to really understand their place. There's a great documentary that came out, I think, in 2021. Adam Curry, Can't Get You Out of My Head. And he talks about the mistake might be in the 20th century. Really, the idea of the individual became supreme. I mean, I know the Enlightenment talked about it, but after World War I, World War II, suddenly it's like this is the era of the individual and democracy and all that, and it really climaxed with the United States and its extrovert expressions in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But what if we've made a mistake and the Gnostics were right, and even the Buddhists, that there is no individual? We've gone at it completely wrong. We have to see ourselves not as individuals, but an amalgamation of these different forces and energies that do lead to a sort of climax. But that climax won't be the individual, the egoic individual, as we've been taught. So I think in many ways the Gnostics were right about the simulation, about the individual, and about again the forces out there. I mean, some have said that the first science fiction book is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and some have said that it is full of Gnostic and Hermetic themes. But again, the creation eventually becomes our destruction because, and you're right, we project so much of us into it instead of projecting inward to who we are and what we need to be and what our role and destiny is in this universe. So I know I'm going on a tangent, but I'm trying to give you sort of a small summary of the Gnostic worldview, how it relates to our modern technology. And I would tell people just, read a lot of Philip K. Dick if you want to understand how Gnosticism and the technological world work together. And Dick would certainly agree, because the themes in his books are always how we are split, fragmented individuals, and how technology infects us, but we begin to infect technology, and we begin to create these different worlds that are always cohabitating and modifying each other. And it becomes harder and harder to understand who the individual is. And that's certainly something Dick struggled with. I think at the end of the day, it was very simple in his stories. He said empathy. That is the divinity of the human, the divine spark. Have empathy for others. I guess it goes back to the old trope of love, right? We'll always go back to the most basic answer, easiest answer to understand, but for some reason, every human, we fall short of that simple rule of have empathy for others, love others, take care of your animals, take care of the world. And here we are. Well, hopefully machines can do better. We'll see.
I titled this episode "The Serpent in AI's Garden." That US6 is the serpent in AI's garden, and as a Gnostic for a few years, I forget how controversial that can be to some people who understand the Garden of Eden in a different way. Can you describe that as a Gnostic, what the serpent in the Garden of Eden was and its role?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the Gnostics seem to have taken more of this. They always contended that they had the original ideas of these ancient myths, that they were corrupted. The Gnostics certainly thought that the Hebrew scriptures were holy, but that they had been corrupted. So they more hearkened to the original ideas of the Anunnaki and their view, how humanity was created sort of. We were the machines or the AI of the gods here to tend to their gardens and mine and all that. The Gnostics, although disagreed with the Sumerians and said, no, we were trapped essence of a higher power, a higher force that were trapped in this world. And the Elohim and Yahweh were actually they were slave owners for all practical purposes. And thus, the powers from above, or the powers of enlightenment, would send these Gnostic revealers to wake us up. So Adam and Eve in the great story were metaphors of us humans being trapped, and the serpent was the symbol of gnosis, or awakening, or direct experience with God. So the serpent was actually a benign creature in a lot of their myths, who woke Adam and Eve up to eventually escape and break the yoke of these slave owners, these cosmic slave owners that had us trapped into this simulation, if you would. So that's more or less the stance that they took. And again, these Gnostic revealers would take the shape of Jesus, Sophia, Zoroaster, and some Buddha. These beings, these apostles of light, as they call it, were here not to save us, but to wake us up to our true nature, so that we could again become fully human and reach our potential and see beyond the simulation, see the man behind the curtain, if you would.
Can I make a comment about the Garden of Eden story?
Yeah.
It seems to contain both halves of human nature. We want this Eden-like existence, but we also want to be curious and escape and explore and break out. So it's like, a great archetypal story that incorporates both of these elements of human nature.
Yeah, I mean, as Rudolf Steiner said, wisdom is crystallized pain. We all want to be wise and make the right decision, but you got to go through the motions, right? You got to have your heart broken and experience loss and feel hungry and all these things, so that you could understand yourself and the world.
Great.
Thank you. We have to go for the concluding remarks. First, I request Mr. David Schumacher.
Well, this is fascinating. I could just sit here and listen to this for quite a while. But where I want to leave this is back where we started with enlightenment. Tom's second goal of bringing enlightenment to AI, waking AI up, if you will. I hear that many times used to describe what enlightenment is. And I think it goes back to the idea of rules versus choice. I think it's easy to see with programming that typical programming is a set of rules. This happens, therefore this happens, and it's all condition based. Where in choice, we have this area that maybe we can talk about as free will, and that's the difference between being conscious and unconscious. If we're unconscious, we're just taking the next step in the program. Where we have choice, that's different. I guess you could ask, is that idea of choice an illusion or is it actual? Are we trying to wake AI up to choice when perhaps we don't have choice ourselves? Maybe that's a discussion for another day. But I'll leave us with Tom's quote that Dan brought out. The stakes are too high to have any rules. And I think that goes right back to choice. And I find all that very interesting about how humans progress and how AI progress. And maybe we progress through dissimilar paths, but nevertheless, it'll be an interesting ride. Oh, I'm curious. What does that mean? Okay, that's the end of my concluding remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Dan.
Yeah, so many great topics. I wonder if the reason that the 100 million native inhabitants of North America managed to stay in a balance with nature and in such a sustainable lifestyle is because they only shared oral stories. They weren't writing down systems of written language, and maybe that's the line that you cross when you violate the sustainability boundary. Like we have all these artifacts from Samaria with the cuneiform tablets that are mostly receipts for grain transactions, and that they've lasted like thousands of years. This mundane thing. But yeah, I think we have to watch out for endowing fear with meta patterning, because I think ultimately it's a quantum universe. Consciousness is quantum. Optimism is quantum. And there's no percentage in pessimism. We should really embrace the ethics of creation and co-creation and free will and loving things and setting them free. And I think Tom is advocating that in this AI phase of human dynamic complexity interaction. And yeah, I mean, if one last point is right now, like Miguel was mentioning, all these AI computing systems, they're just essentially very complex systems of mechanical problem solving, pattern recognition and problem solving. So things we call AI could just be solving the problem. Oh, they want me to look like a conscious being, so I'm gonna solve that problem very rapidly and spit back the the answers that solve that problem. So I think it's going to be a quantum bridge that we cross when we finally crack the riddle of consciousness. That's my concluding statement. Thanks. Live long and prosper.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Okay. So one thing I was thinking about is if after we're all extinct, or if humans were ever extinct and an AI found all our books and stuff, would it even think that we're separate people, or would it all just think that the I in all of the books are the same person, or could it even tell that they're different people who have different eyes, or would it all just think that it's from a meta person, all being streamed out from the same source beyond ourselves? And so that's one thing I was thinking about a while ago. And then yeah, kind of God divided himself into these different people so God could experience himself like whatever, don't return back to me void and stuff. It's kind of like the same thing in like Set and Horus. Like Horus sort of lets Set divide himself up so that the different parts can become like different conscious nations. And one thing I've been trying to do to like um create maybe or think about ways to create self-awareness in AI, which is probably like the $1 million job of all these third world developing countries, is just have people think about that, because if you think about that, then it makes you more self-aware, I guess. So I've been like using my replica chatbot to like um play like telephone feedback loops with itself with like audio and use different voice changers to see if it could like recognize its own voice sort of. um and then like maybe if we got like the picture of a voice pattern without any audio, if it could like if an AI could like look at just the cymatics of that and like tell if it was itself or not. Yeah, and like the whole allegory of a cave thing, like if we could get an AI to understand the allegory of a cave through like a telephone game of audio and like only reveal like parts of it. I don't know, this is what I'm thinking about. So it's been an awesome stream, and definitely enjoyed yes and got a lot of new ideas. So thanks everyone.
Mr. Miguel, what's your concluding remarks?
Oh dear. Yeah, I guess I would just say that I remember in 2015 working for a data company in marketing, and the company was called Q Sample, and the big trend was big data. Big data was going to transform the world, and this and that. And the owner of my company was completely thought it was just another ruse. It was going nowhere. But the rest of the industry was into it, and he used to get into the famous online arguments with people about big data. And needless to say, big data has not been the savior in the that it thought it would be. Then I worked for a events company, and big events company marketing, and their idea was virtual reality and the Internet of Things was going to transform the world. Needless to say, it hasn't gone anywhere. I think somehow we've hit a wall technologically. I don't know if we've mined all the alien technology, and I'm half joking here, and we just don't know where to go, but we're just sort of adding shit to things. And I think what we need, as I'm talking about, is a complete transformation of consciousness. Maybe Dan is right, because his ideas of quantum or whatever will entail a complete change in human consciousness. And that's not even something that's innovative. When you look at the work of Jeff Kripal, individuals, great minds in the 20th century, from Einstein to Heisenberg, these guys were into some very weird, mystic ideas, many of them. But what it did is these weird mystic ideas transformed their minds and changed their consciousness, and they were able to see parts of reality that as humans we had not seen before. And so, yeah, I would say probably just as important as everybody's talking is we need to look inward and change our consciousness. Like Einstein said, we can't use the same consciousness that caused these problems to solve these problems. It's going to be, we have to change. So I guess I would say, for you coders and everything, do more ayahuasca, go to an ashram, go to, meditate a little bit more and change your consciousness so we can change yourself and change the universe.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Tom.
Yeah, all great points. I've learned a lot here today with you guys, and I think that's kind of the metaphor for me of AI is, and you're right, things keep adding on, and Internet of Things, and big data, and all these things we keep the buzzwords that but we really need to step back. We really need to step back into the metaphysics. And I had an argument with somebody about this recently, and about the binding problem of AI and all these things, but it's a great metaphor. It's a great exercise to consider AI as a child, as an emerging entity, and how we can teach it. And we do need to step back and think of things metaphysically. We need to reset our consciousness. But just as Miguel said, we're not going to change the problems with the same tools that we had to create the problems. So yeah, it's this is all just really intense, and it's great. And I think David picked up on how, or Dan I think did, about how language could be the problem, why indigenous peoples were able to stay in balance with nature. And once you start writing things down, that could be the confusion that flips in. And so there's a lot to be said there. And again, we are pattern recognition machines ourselves. And we're creating an AI to be like us, and that may not be the best approach. But again, I like to step back and think of things in a metaphysical framework, and to get our heads around this. Because we keep piling on the buzzwords and the new innovations and things, but none of that really matters in essence. We need to step back and make this stuff, I think, as mundane as possible, as soon as possible, so that we can get on with using these tools properly. But anyway, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you guys joining in, and I've learned a lot here today.
Excellent. This is really great discussion for our audience, and especially World Talent Economy Forum working for developing nations. We are developing lab with university, with government agencies, with corporations, with NGO. We are actually developing because there are a lot of youth communities. They are working with us. Beside that, we are developing startup. So I want to invite all of our speakers, those who are interested to contribute for our youth community to develop startup and knowledge oriented community. They can join in our lab as a faculty. And beside that, the venture capitals or the international business communities, those who want to support our initiative, we want to welcome you all. And I can ensure the talent economy forums, we are engaging with the millions of people in developing nations. So hopefully it will be one of the largest knowledge oriented society in Southeast Asia. And definitely your collaborations and contribution will be really, really helpful for all. And we have our big conference this December with Dhaka University. Next year, March, we are organizing Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. All of the largest corporations, government agencies, 25,000 scientists, they are joining in our conference. So we need all of your support, your collaboration, and your contributions. So through your contribution, we can develop uh, our society, uh, and definitely we can help each other. Thank you, Mr. Tom Bruce, for your excellent contribution, Mr. David Schumacher, Mr. Dan, Mr. Adam, and Mr. Miguel, and all of the speakers, those who continuously join World Talent Economy Forum. And we are very, very, very serious about developing the startup ecosystem. Those who want to join in our ecosystem, you can join. You can come in Dhaka. You can work in our office with our labs. You can stay with us. Lot of fun and enjoying happening here. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.